can say definitively that religions are all bullshit.
Welcome to Brainstorm.
We have the explicit tag for a reason.
This is a base level argument to a higher level morality.
I get paid to science?
To science as much as one can science.
What the hell was my point?
Trigger warning. The Brainstorm podcast will criticize your most cherished beliefs. We attack nonsense in all its forms and discuss difficult subjects. If you peddle pseudoscience, supernatural woo, or religious dogma, then this is not your safe place. This is the home of hardcore skepticism.
To those listening live or to our patrons, welcome back. For those listening weekly, welcome to the Shift to Reason Radio, the Brainstorm production that tries to educate and inform. We'll take current events and important skeptical topics and try to analyze them critically. Remember, we're live on brainstormradio.net every second Friday, and today is January 19th, 2018. I'm still joined by Leo.
Hey there.
Lisa.
I am here.
And Rene.
Hello.
With the always amazing Dave doing sound.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So, I guess we're going to go into some religious stuff. So, let's play that bumper.
Cornerstone, this might be new to some of you. Scripture says that even our righteous deeds are as filthy rags to God. So even the good things that you do, even things like feeding the hungry and clothing the poor and taking in widows and orphans, as nice as those things are, if not done from the place of obedience to and a relationship with God, are completely worthless and disgusting to God. If you're not daily walking in a place of relationship to God, then the news that we have to bring you is that you're on your way to hell right now.
All right.
Everybody's favorite bumper.
Everybody's favorite bumper.
It gets everyone worked up. So the story I'm covering this week is in the Atlantic. It's called The Underground Railroad to Save Atheists. So I actually had a different story this week originally assigned to me. It was like Goop recommending coffee enemas, which are apparently a bad idea. That was just the article I read. So there you go. You have that. So
I think the way that came from was Gwyneth Paltrow has been told to shove it up her ass enough times, but she misunderstood.
Yeah, I don't even. It's anyways. So don't do that. But meanwhile, this is a more serious.
Slightly more important issue.
Well, okay, so I love this article for a few reasons. Now, we often choose articles for this podcast that are on maybe atheist websites that come from maybe a less mainstream source. But this is an article in The Atlantic this week, which is a huge magazine. It's not particularly atheistic as far as I know. I mean, I think it's somewhat left-leaning, but I know that the editor-in-chief is a relatively conservative person, David Frum. So, I mean, it's not necessarily something that they do. So they thought it was important enough to publish it. So I thought that was a pretty big deal in and of itself. So I thought that was really interesting, and it gives really interesting and good publicity to this issue. So it's talking about talking about the CFI, the Center for Inquiry, who has just I don't know if they've just started up a program, but they have a program to try to help atheists who are in danger because of their beliefs, basically.
Okay.
So they as these stories often do, they profile a specific atheist from Iraq named Lubna Yassin. She's a student, and she basically received death threats for being outspoken in her views on atheism and being an atheist. She describes being raised by an atheist mother in Iraq, which is interesting.
Wow.
And being harassed by, for example, Al-Qaeda to wear hijab when she was driving around and that sort of thing. So actually, she had death threats. So this organization, I'm just looking for it here. I can't find the stupid thing. Anyways, the organization launched, it's called Secular Rescue, launched by the Center for Inquiry in 2016. And they basically helped get her out of the country and get her to safety. So, so she's now living in California. She's safe-ish there. So,
safe-ish.
Well,
do they? How many people can they help?
Well, I think they said they've helped on the order of about 30 people.
Okay.
So they raised, I mean, so it's not a huge number of people. And I think atheists in several countries are at really high risk.
Yeah, for sure.
So that's not even a tip of an iceberg sort of thing in terms of this problem worldwide. However, it's something. And I think it's very interesting that this story gets picked up by a major news organization and talked about in this way. I think it's just super important. So I think that's actually more important than anything. The article points out that there are actually 12 nations in which apostasy, meaning it basically means if you're one religion and you change your mind. So if you become an atheist, or if you become, actually, if you're, I think if you're a Muslim and you become a Christian, that's also apostasy. As if you changing your mind, basically, from your beliefs is called apostasy, and it's typically spoken about in Islam, but I presume it could happen in any religion. But apostasy can be punished by death in Afghanistan, Iran, Malaysia, the Maldives, Mauritania, Nigeria, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Somalia, Sudan, the UAE, and Yemen. And Pakistan threatens the death penalty for blasphemy, which may include expressions of atheism. It also points out that, for example, Yasin was rescued out of Iraq, which doesn't technically supports your right to freedom of conscience in the Constitution. However, in some countries, you get no support from police or from authorities. So even though technically it's not illegal to be an atheist, they're like, well, you know, whatever happens to you, you deserve because the culture supports it. So,
so it's almost like the law doesn't necessarily matter in some of these cases. Like,
well, when you think about how many people do we have here in Regina? Like, what is it? Like 200,000 people in Regina? 300,000 people. How many cops do we have in the city?
I'm not even sure.
What, a few hundred? I don't know. Something like that, right?
Maybe.
Less than 1,000,
yeah,
right?
Probably.
Is the reason that us, 200,000, 300,000 people, is the reason we don't kill each other because there's cops like physically stopping us from doing it, right? Is it all just because there's laws, or is it because we have a culture in place that says, okay, it's not okay to kill people?
Yeah.
So I think when you have, as a culture, you have to decide what's okay and what's not okay. And I've heard it described before that laws are really just the minimum bar, like the lowest possible ethical standard. Like, okay, no stealing, no killing people. Like for example, we were speaking before about the whole sexual harassment Me Too thing going on right now. So whereas what Bill Cosby did is breaking a law, very, very low bar.
Right.
What Aziz Ansari did, still not cool, not illegal, but not cool, right? So there you can see like Bill Cosby much worse, and that's why he hits the lower bar of doing something illegal.
Yeah.
And Aziz Ansari is still not cool, so not illegal, but not nice.
I think it's also, what's it called? The terms mores and fores, difference between what is legally and what is culturally
unacceptable.
Culturally unacceptable.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
If I remember my terms right.
Yeah. They also described government complicity in Bangladesh, which has seen the murder of at least 10 writers who had questioned religious dogma since 2015. I know I've heard of atheists having a lot of problems in Bangladesh. So you don't have, technically it's not illegal in Bangladesh, but, quote, we know there have been and may still be hit lists issued by those who are trying to keep their hands clean, encouraging young radicals to slaughter secularists of their own volition. And one of the worst parts is the callousness of the response from the Bangladeshi government. From the prime minister and other officials, we get several versions of, well, they shouldn't have been insulting our religious beliefs. So it's kind of a blame the victim sort of mentality here. So anyways, very interesting that...
Very much not protected by the law.
Well, we complain. I mean, the article goes on to talk about how, it's not necessarily easy to be an atheist in the United States either.
Right.
However, when you compare the situation in our countries to some of these other places, it's quite different,
Right, yeah.
And it's quite extreme. So
for sure.
It's interesting that there's a group that is trying to help. And I think even just bringing exposure to the issue is very helpful on this level. So yeah. So that was the article that I read, and you should read it too.
Very cool. I guess that's the only religious story we have. So.
Actually, wait, can I say one more interesting thing about this? Sorry, just really quickly. Apparently there's just as many, if you actually do a poll of people in Saudi Arabia, which is definitely a religiously, run country, like it's a theistic government. if you do a poll and it's anonymous, you actually get the same number of non-religious people as you get if you poll people in the United States, for example, which is very interesting. And apparently, there are Arabic Facebook groups that are promoting atheism that have tens of thousands of followers, and they often get targeted by cyber jihadists. The cyber jihadists post pornography, and then Facebook shuts down the group.
Okay.
Yeah. So anyway, but also there are 10 million downloads of the Arabic version of the Richard Dawkins book, The God Delusion.
Yeah.
Which is really, so there's obviously an appetite for it. And I think there's an undercurrent in some of these super religious countries that actually the people are looking for. So I thought that was very interesting. So now I'll stop talking about the article, but it's really good. You guys should check it out.
It's almost like people don't like oppression.
Yeah.
That's weird.
Yeah.
It seems like that's a running theme these days. Like people don't like oppression. I don't know.
People are strange that way.
Yeah.
It's annoying, really.
It is. Why can't they just
be oppressed?
Just stay oppressed?
We like freedom somehow.
Somehow humans like freedom. All right. Let's go into a woo report.
I'm not a scientist, but if I can tell you your science sucks, your science really sucks.
That just makes no fucking sense. I mean, it's just bullshit. Fuck.
Okay, so we're going to skip over Destin's story.
Yeah. He's not here.
Because he's
Fuck
sick.
Destin.
So, Rene, you're up.
Okay, now we're going from people that don't like oppression to people that have almost too much freedom. Emphasis on the dumb.
Dumb.
Okay, because apparently there's a new trend out there right now. I guess, according to this article, it's based in parts of California.
Okay.
And I guess there was originally a New York Times article that kind of started reporting on this, and it's called raw water. So because there's I figured you'd love this one. So there's this thing.
Sounds like cholera. You may as well just say cholera. Sorry.
Yeah. It's organic. Give me a moment. I have a joke. I have a joke about that.
Sorry.
But basically, that they drink unfiltered, untreated, just straight from natural sources water.
Of course.
And of course charge like out the wazoo for it. Like it says here, for a 2.5 gallon bottle of raw water, it sells for $36.99. And they also said that in some places they were selling it for $60.99.
For how much?
For like a 2.5 gallon bottle.
Wow.
Yeah. That lasts for apparently just one lunar cycle before it goes green.
But you also drink more than that between one lunar cycle.
Yeah.
2.5 gallons is at best a couple of days.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. It's not very, like, how much money? $60?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So these guys are going to be making hand over fist. Like, this is stupid. But, yeah. So anyway, so they claim like, it's the normal woo thing that, oh, if it's natural, it can't be bad for you. And then, the earth just, filters it and adds minerals and blah, 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 bullshit. And why? Because they're scared of fluoride being mind control.
Oh my God.
And, all that kind of shit. And then, and like, there's something in here about, one of the guys, this Makunde Singh, which of course he changed his fucking name to that. His real name is Christopher, I think.
White dude,
very white dude. They say in the article, this walking human man bun. But, it hasn't been filtered, treated, or sterilized in any way. He says that when the first time he take a drink, if you dare to watch the video, he talks about how that first drink of fresh water had a better mouthfeel, and it was somehow more hydrating.
That's not supposed to be a thing.
Yeah. Meanwhile, the reality is, if you drink untreated water, you're going to get
diarrhea,
untold different waterborne viruses.
That's right.
But the thing is, if you get cholera or dysentery, they're just going to market it as the all organic weight loss program.
Yes. Dengue fever your way to slimmer.
Yeah, exactly.
I have had dengue and it is not fun.
No.
How did you get it from well water? Admit it.
Mosquitoes.
I associate it with poor sanitation, but I guess it is more of a mosquito-borne thing. Sorry. I'm sorry to dengue to associate you with raw water.
But
I think you can get it through raw water. I think but.
At any rate,
you can get raw water for free if you visit some country. Like you want to go to Mexico, right? Just drink the water out of the tap, and you got your raw water right there, and the diarrhea that goes with it. Like you don't have to pay. You don't have to.
I would like to make a clarification though that
some parts of Mexico,
they do have treated water in the taps as well.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, you can't go to Mexico. Where do you have to go for that?
Well, you can if you go to like small towns, but that's
water sort of thing.
That's the same thing here.
You can literally there's a river in Saskatchewan that you can just go get.
I am so racist towards Mexicans.
You're
clearly, yeah.
Even worse.
She's taking Gumby's spot. That's what's happening.
Fuck
Burn.
me.
But so in other words, like,
fucking hate Gumby the most.
This is just a stupid idea. This continuing goofy idea of if it's natural, it's got to be good for you. Other than the fact that for centuries we've had people dying of cholera and dysentery and a whole list of other waterborne illnesses, and yet, but some fucking hippie in California is going to make a mint off of stupid people drinking untreated water.
Random bacteria is somehow good for you.
Hey, do you know what else is natural?
Death.
Hurricanes.
That's true.
Rape.
Bears.
Asteroids hitting the earth. All fucking part of nature. I'm just saying.
But I've also heard that hurricanes are quite hydrating, so that I felt like that was one of the...
Not in Mexico. No, sorry, I said to take it.
But the thing is, you can't market any of those things for $60 a bottle.
You might be able to somehow market bear visits.
Yeah, or like tours to the eye of the hurricane or something.
It's nice when you get there, but it's a bitch to travel.
Yeah, that's right.
Oh, fuck.
But it's just a continuation of the Alex Jones bullshit about gay bomb and turning the frogs gay and fluoride in the water. All this.
What's the problem with gay frogs?
I don't know.
There's gay penguins. That's natural.
Yeah.
What do you want?
For stupid people to stop marketing to even dumber people.
I honestly don't think people are stupid. I think they're cynical. I think they know that it's bullshit and they're just making a profit. I think they're shucksters. I think they're con artists.
Snake oil salesmen.
They're snake oil salesmen.
Yeah, you know what? More than likely that's probably the truth. It's just the people that buy into it that is just like, what the fuck?
Yeah. I'm sure there's a subset of employees over who believe in it, blah, blah, blah. But you know what? The president of the cigarette company doesn't smoke, right? And this, what's his name?
Yes.
Christopher, whatever his name is. He doesn't drink the raw water.
Christopher Sanborn, or also known as Makunde Singh.
Well, he don't drink the water.
Yeah.
I don't think so.
Christopher doesn't drink the water.
He just drinks the Kool-Aid.
Yeah.
He hopes that you'll drink the Kool-Aid, but he won't. I don't think he'll drink the Kool-Aid. That's I don't think he's a believer.
You buy his raw water and he's sitting at home drinking Cristal.
Which is sterile due to the alcohol.
Yeah.
Hey, Lachlan is suggesting that the sewage lagoons outside of Weyburn are filled with raw water. So.
Yeah, that's right.
We have an economic opportunity here.
Yeah.
We could sell it.
Gumby's always talking about this, so.
Well, yeah, and he doesn't like ethics.
No.
Or feminism.
That's right. We just actually, for bonus content for $5 and up patrons, me and Gumby just did had a conversation last week about ethics and whether or not they're valuable. Or
wait a second here. Do you mean that I have access to issues and episodes more issues that I still won't listen to?
That's right.
Okay.
You have all the access to all the things that you won't listen to.
I should get access to the things that I won't listen to. That sounds like a great opportunity.
You know what? Guess what? This is not the only podcast I subscribe to that gives me bonus content that I also do not listen to. So you should feel included in a group of very good podcasts.
I also don't listen to all the bonus content from most of the shows I listen to. Some I do, though. I mean, if I'm paying money, I want I want that bonus content.
I'm just doing it to support the shows. I like the shows.
That's fair. That's a fair way to do it. But
I don't need things given back. I'm not cynical, I don't need the promise of heaven in order to believe, right? I just believe.
Right. You do good for good's sake.
For good's sake.
That's right.
That's right.
I'm sure it sounds sincere that way too.
But that's disgusting to God. Didn't you hear the bumper?
Didn't you hear the bumper? That's right.
Like I was telling Cory and Rene as I walked in, I'd bought this homeless guy coffee on my way to the show, and then he's like, "God bless you," and I was like, never. Like the irony of doing it on my way to the Atheist podcast. I was like, never mind.
Never mind.
Which is right across the street from the warehouse books, and there's irony abounds.
So it looks like I actually gave Gumby and Lisa the same story.
Which story?
The coffee enema one. So it's a good
I can do the coffee enema one. I read it.
Okay, let's do the coffee enema.
But I don't
story.
have it up on my phone. You have it on your phone?
Or should I do mine first?
Or no, we'll
do you last.
Leo. Leo's
You're
last. Do you have the
Here, let's.
Sorry, I don't have it up on my phone. I'm a terrible.
Here you go.
Okay, I did read it. So, okay, fine. It's actually a funny article. It's on metro.co.uk. Doctor explains why you shouldn't follow Goop's advice of shooting coffee up your bum. So, in addition to recommending sticking Jay's eggs up your vagina, if you had one, and walking around barefoot to fix your depression, apparently Goop is also recommending cleaning out your colon with coffee. So it's part of Goop's Beauty and Wellness Detox Guide. So this is Gwyneth Paltrow's website. It actually only costs $125.
Oh my God.
It's only $125.
Thing is this isn't the first time I've heard of this.
No, we've actually covered this like 3 years ago.
Yeah, because I also remember who's that?
Not
Jack,
this, but like
Jack Osborne and did the coffee enema thing in Thailand or something.
I've heard of beer enemas at Craven.
Well,
the thing
that's
is
not the same thing.
You can also just drink the coffee, and it will cleanse your colon. If you
we're going to get there. Hang on, the article talks about this, but this is my favorite quote from Goop's website. So this is a Dr. Junger. I don't know who Dr. Junger is. Anyways, the Goop's website says it's Dr. Junger's pick for those who know what they're doing. So at least the guide isn't suggesting it for people who are new to putting fluids up their asses, right? So that's the important thing. So. Oh, wait. Am I wrong?
If you're a practiced self-enema person.
Guys, I'm so sorry.
What?
All of you who are going to get that $125 enema, that was actually for the space scrub. I'm sorry. That was it's $135 for the quote. And I'm not kidding. It's called the Implant-O-Rama System At-Home Coffee Enema. That is the name.
Anything that says "O-Rama" is never good.
Yeah.
I'm certainly not sticking it up my butt.
Yeah. Now, apparently, it is no longer on the online store, so maybe it's not even good enough for Goop, but we're still going to make fun of it, because why not? So they talked to Jen Gunter, who is a well-known actual doctor, who debunks a lot of these goopy myths.
Dream guest.
I think the important thing is that, I'll just quote her on this, there is no data to suggest that a colonic helps with the elimination of the waste that is transiting the colon on its way out. That is what bowel movements do. There are no toxins to be cleansed or irrigated. That is fake medicine. So apparently a 2011 review on colonics concluded that doctors should, quote, advise patients that colon cleansing has no proven benefit and many adverse effects. So don't do it. You don't need to.
Don't do it.
It doesn't make any sense. There is no mucus that is left behind, as Goop claims. It's all nothing. No one needs a cleanse ever.
Except the colonoscopy every now and then, maybe.
But a colonoscopy is to visualize what's going on. So you do need you need an enema so the camera can get up there. Mm-hmm. There's a real reason for that, because colon cancer actually exists and you can see it on a camera.
Right.
But it's not the same as cleansing it's not going to do anything. It's not. Yeah. Yeah. So don't do it.
Don't do it.
Don't do it. Yeah. So she recommends keep the coffee out of your rectum and into your cup. It is only meant to access your colon from the top. That's what she said.
I agree.
Which is exactly what Leo said. So I think that pretty much means you're a doctor.
Pretty much.
From now on, you shall call me doctor.
I will call you doctor.
It makes you overqualified to work for Goop.
Yep.
Yeah.
I was just thinking that I would be more than fine if we did not have to cover Gwyneth Paltrow at all in the rest of 2018. That'd be great.
You know, it's
Good luck with that.
It's just funny though. Like, I mean, we don't have to cover it, but it's so absurd.
I was making a joke. It'd be great if she just didn't come up with any more new shit.
I have another one of my dream guests is, I think his name is Tim Caulfield. Wrote the book Gwyneth Paltrow is Wrong About Everything.
Yeah.
I honestly, a lot of these topics that we cover, I tend to be like, well, like, who gives a fuck about this? Who the fuck would believe that anyways? That the problem is there is a real subset of people who actually believe this. And
how many people do that?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, well, Gwyneth Paltrow said for me I'll give it a try.
Like,
she's famous.
Who has $135? Like, I mean, I want $135 leaving around to spend on this, because I would spend on something much better. Like,
I'd invested in Bitcoin.
I'd buy shoes.
Or not.
And then lose it all the next day.
Have a yarn.
Yeah. That's right.
Just saying. People, if you have that kind of money, just send it to me. Become a patron.
Become a patron. That's right.
Take your significant other out to dinner. Buy your grandchildren something.
And have money left over.
Exactly. Do it several times.
That's right.
Maybe your significant other can do a colonoscopy on you. Whatever you're into. I'm just saying.
Yeah, whatever floats your boat.
Lachlan says his faith in humanity is gone.
Can't believe you had faith in humanity?
That was a mistake. All right, let's do another quick ad break, and then we'll come back for some politics.
If you like what we're doing and want to help us keep the lights on, go become a patron at patreon.com/Brainstorm Podcast. You can hear the bonus half hour that we record every episode and get a shout out when you support the show. Become a patron for just $1 an episode at patreon.com/Brainstorm Podcast. Or you can support the show by ordering a t-shirt, mug, or other gear from our store at caffeepress.ca/Brainstorm Podcast Gear. If you can't afford to become a patron or buy gear, then why not give us a rating or write a review on iTunes or Stitcher? Every rating makes it easier for people to find us. Thanks for your support.
The Hardcore Skeptic Examines is a bi-monthly documentary-style podcast that includes interviews, research, and commentary from your host, Cory Johnston. That's me. As the host of the Brainstorm podcast, I've spent the last 3+ years trying to spread critical thinking and skepticism while having fun. This project is intended to look at some of those same topics covered by Brainstorm, but a bit deeper. With the long intervals between episodes and the long format, I'm hoping to provide good information that educates as well as entertains. Check out my Patreon for more details at www.patreon.com/hardcoreskeptic or follow my Twitter @hardcoreskeptic.
The Atheists,
the Bible,
and No Wardrobe, the podcast.
Wait a minute. No wardrobe? You mean we're going to be naked while we do this?
Well, seeing how I'm an atheist and I'm reading the Bible, and since clothes are flammable... Fire! I thought it might be a good idea to take them all off first.
Naked or not, follow along as we read, analyze, and try to keep you from falling asleep as we go through this boring-ass book.
Find us on iTunes, Stitcher, and Spreaker. Who knows? We may even be on YouTube someday.
All right. We're back. And we're going to go right into politics.
Everybody complains about politicians. Everybody says they suck. Yeah! Well, where do people think these politicians come from? They don't fall out of the sky. They don't pass through a membrane from another reality. They come from American parents and American families, American homes, American schools, American churches, American businesses, and American universities, and they're elected by American citizens. This is the best we can do, folks. This is what we have to offer. It's what our system produces. Garbage in, garbage out.
All right.
Garbage in, garbage out.
My favorite part of that is he says, everybody says politicians suck. And some guy in the audience goes, yeah!
Yeah!
All I got to say is that I love George Carlin.
For sure.
He's amazing. I know he's smiling down on us from heaven right now.
Yep. No. If you've listened to enough Carlin, What he is he's a frisbee on someone's house.
What? That's what he wanted to do?
No, that was one of his bits that he's like, I wanted to be, I can't remember the exact bit, but basically something along the lines of, when you die, you just get reincarnated as a frisbee and get tossed onto someone's house.
Well, I'm sure he's listening to the podcast. Anyways.
Yeah, either way.
Maybe he's on this roof.
Yeah.
Maybe.
All right. So let's get into it. So this is I'm going to talk a little bit about carbon control policies. This is a huge topic, so I'm going to try and...
You are in Saskatchewan. The angry mob is forming as we speak.
On their way. They're just getting the pitchforks.
Did you use the word carbon tax?
I did not say carbon tax. I said carbon control policies.
Wow.
So this is a huge topic.
Liberal word double speak.
I'm going to try and do a little 101, not go too deep into it, kind of do a little overview, summary of it, and some of the strongest points against and for some of the main ones.
Sounds good.
So there are many different options for controlling CO2 in the atmosphere, but I'm going to focus mainly on carbon tax and cap and trade, which is specifically because the premier thinks that cap and trade is the only way and that tax is shit. That if you're going to do anything, that cap and trade might work. So I'm going to do a quick little explanation of carbon tax. I'm assuming that most people understand what these two things are roughly. But so carbon tax is not a direct tax on CO2 in the air. It's rather a tax on the source of the CO2.
Right.
So it's mainly fossil fuels like coal, oil, and gas. And it works in a similar way that liquor tax or cigarette tax works, that it is done at the source. So most people don't even really see the tax anywhere. It's just added to the price. And then when you go to the gas station or when your electrical bill comes or your heating bill or whatever the fuck you have, it's not.
So when I complain about my $1.10 per liter gas.
Yep. So it would just be added to that. And it's calculated based on how much a liter of gasoline, how much CO2 it produces, but it's done at the source, which will be important later when I go in.
It's not done at the pump.
Wait,
yeah. Do you have?
Well, I just have a very basic question. Maybe you're going to answer this later, but is the point of this to disincentivize it, to make it more expensive, or is it to take the money and use it to do something better?
I will go into some.
Okay, sorry.
I think a lot of the questions will be answered once I go through it.
Sounds good.
So that's roughly how carbon tax works. So there's a whole lot of other things that I could say about it, but we'll just leave it at that. So cap and trade works with a regulator, which tends to be a government, determines a cap of CO2 that they want. So they set for whatever reasons, they set a cap. This much CO2 can be put into the atmosphere, and then pollution permits are issued and are then distributed to polluting firms or businesses. And this is either done for free, so the government can just give them to their biggest polluters. So like they could give Sask Power some carbon permits or some polluting permits, and or they can auction them off, which is the preferred method, where there's an open auction and then the companies can buy it. And this is, in theory, this tells the government how much the firms are willing to pay. So how much it would cost them to reduce the
market value.
The market value of the permit.
Polluting.
So with the recommended way of doing it is that you auction them off. You shouldn't give them away for free. And then the government also gets money from auctioning them off.
Right. There's no disincentive if you give them for free, right?
Well, it can work both ways.
They're still limited, I think.
They're still limited. But the reason why you would auction them off is you want to know how much Sask Power is actually willing to pay for how much. If you just give them for free, they would say, "Oh, just give us all of them."
That's right.
Like, so then if they actually have to pay, then they'll say, "Oh no, we just want this many. We don't need more." Because we don't want to pay you all this extra money. So that's the main reason for it.
Is this actually something that's done anywhere?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
It's only a couple of places that have it, but it's
super popular among right wing.
Yeah, it's mostly popular as a talking point. So people always promote how great it is, but there are very few places that have an actual functioning one. And so the last thing is, if they're auctioned off, after the initial issuing of the permits. So once they're auctioned off, from then on, the price of those is determined by the market. So businesses can then buy and sell it from each other. If one company doesn't use all their permits, then they can sell it to somebody who needs more. And and the price is set by whoever buys and sells them. So the government steps out, and then it's left up to the devices of the market. Okay, so that's a brief little summary of the two.
Okay.
And now there's a list of criteria which is used to determine if a policy, and this goes beyond just environmental policy. This is kind of a 5 criteria that a lot of policies have to go through to make sure that they're good.
Okay.
So the first one is efficiency and cost effectiveness. So are we getting our bang for our buck? Are we achieving reduction for the price that it's costing whoever is paying for it? That's number one. Number 2 is fairness. Are the right people paying for whatever we're doing?
Okay.
Number 3 is enforceability. The cost and ability to enforce said policy. Number 4, does it incentivize innovation? So will this promote companies to improve their practices and actually make things better? And then the 4th one is morality, which is a very subjective clause that is also, it needs to be considered, and it's the non-empirical one that can't really be measured, but you still consider the moral and ethical implications of whatever you're doing. Okay. So those are the 5. So a brief comparison. So now I'm going to do a brief comparison of how the two, I guess, do when they're put through the screen of 5 criteria.
Sounds good.
So a tax, so I should say on the first criteria, both the tax and the cap and trade are considered to be efficient and effective. So they're considered that you're getting your bang for your buck. However you do it, they will most likely achieve. They'll be efficient.
Okay.
So, but tax can only ensure the price, but not the quantity of reduction. So with the tax, you can tell people it's going to be this much, but we cannot tell you how much it's going to reduce.
Right.
We know that it's going to reduce somewhat, but we can't tell you how much it's going to reduce. So if we like the current proposal of $10 per ton of CO2 in the air, they know that it's going to reduce the amount that's being emitted, but there is no way of calculating how much because you can't predict the behavior of each individual who's going to change their habits.
Now, once you do it long enough, would you be able to? I'm just going to. I can guess what you're going to ask next. So the way tax works is basically you start with a low tax and then you incrementally raise it and then track the changes in CO2 emission and until you reach your cap, your target,
your hoped goal,
your hoped for goal. So that's how you just slowly raise it. You want to start a little bit below what you think it might be, just like a rough guess, and then start going up. Cap and trade ensures the quantity of reductions, hence the cap, since there's only a limited amount of permits, but it can never ensure the price because the market determines the price after the initial auction. This is especially risky, and this is one of the very big pitfalls of cap and trade. It turns into speculative buying very quickly. Right. So companies will, when they think that people are going to increase their pollution, they will buy cheap permits if they can, and then try and sell them at a higher rate, and it becomes kind of a commodity where companies
because capitalism.
So that's one of the huge pitfalls of letting the market determine the price, because then it becomes a similar issue as cheating or the tax evasion, like where you find all these loopholes of how you can make money off of So that's the first criteria. Second criteria, on the fairness side, tax is inherently not fair so the wrong people are paying for the reduction of carbon. So if you consider a low income household pays a way higher percentage of their income towards that, because a poor man's car uses the same amount of gasoline as a rich man's car. So like more of your income goes towards the energy you consume, and most of that energy, like electricity and gasoline and all that, is taxed. So the way this is, there's already a way to get around this, and BC is a pretty good example. they do. I forgot the word. See if I have it written down. Oh, shite. Yes, tax rebates. That's the word I was looking for. So there's a system in which just automatically when you file your taxes, there's a thing if you're
below a certain income level, then
so it just gets kind of tacked onto that, and then you get a check for your tax rebate.
Okay.
So that's one way of getting around the fairness issue. And
just to apply that to Saskatchewan, I know there's a lot of people who are really concerned that farmers will be unfairly hit by a tax. So a rebate system could alleviate some of that stress on farmers.
There's also another proposal. I don't know if this is done anywhere, but so farmers, if you grow living things that suck carbon out of the air, there's also
carbon credits.
Right. so that you still pay all the tax, but at the end of the day, you kind of get credits for it, and then it cancels each other out, and you never pay anything. That's kind of a. I don't think it. As far as I know, it's not being applied anywhere specifically. But it's
an idea.
But it could work. So pretty much to make the tax fair, you have to have some kind of rebate system where you give it back to the people who shouldn't be paying for it.
Right.
So, and on a corporate level, it is generally, I would say, almost always assumed to be fair.
Right.
Because we have no such thing as low-income companies. We call them bankrupt. So companies are not people. So for companies, it's always considered fair.
Right.
So the cap and trade is also assumed to be fair, but only as fair as the corporate market. So which doesn't say much. The corporate market is not all that fair, but it's pretty much since they determine the price and they control most of how those permits get traded, so that it's considered as fair as the market, roughly.
Okay.
Yeah. That's some of these things just like, hey, sure.
As fair as the market. Yeah. That's how that works.
So not completely, but it is what it is.
Yeah.
Okay. On the third, the enforceability. Actually, I should do a question. Which one do you think is easier to enforce?
Well, carbon tax seems really easy.
Yes, you are correct. Carbon tax is very, very easy to enforce because it's done at the source. Like I said, it's going to be important later. Since it's done at the source, it is very simple. Most people never.
You don't get your gasoline if you don't pay for it.
Yeah, so
that's right.
So and most people, you don't have to put it in your taxes anywhere. It's just like it's included. There you go.
Whereas now SAS Power is allowed to emit X number of tons of carbon, and they actually emitted X plus 5 tons. How do you prove it? How do you?
So there's a shitload of, and this is where conservatives should be on board with the tax, because if a cap and trade system would be implemented, there would be thousands and thousands and thousands of regulators would need to be hired, because you can't trust companies entirely just to report, yes, we didn't emit any more than the credit than the permits that we had. So that's one of the downsides, that enforceability for cap and trade is very, very hard, and in a lot of cases, very dubious enforcement at best. So like it very heavily just relies on self-reporting of companies, because
that'll happen.
Yeah, you can't actually go into every single firm and let me check this. Yeah. It would cost so much that at the end it
wouldn't be worth it.
Unrealistic. And so when it comes to the fourth one,
wait, is that why somebody like what's his face? Who's the premier? Not anymore. Whatever. Is that why conservatives would be for it? Because they know it can't really be regular. You know what I mean? Like, they're
probably
just,
partly.
It's like
they can't ever be seen as being for a tax.
Well, the thing is, the main reason why the right is leaning for, if at all, for any environmental policy, it is because of the market component of cap and trade. They don't believe government should meddle that much, so they like the idea that
that's bureaucracy. Yeah. It's like so much bureaucracy.
So And that's why they think that, oh, yes, if the companies are in charge of buying and selling and controlling the price of whatever, so the government can just step back. But they can't because they actually need to regulate it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, the companies can take care of the pricing of it amongst themselves, but they're very unlikely to police themselves. So in the end, the whole view that cap and trade is so much better for the right wing. Now, either way, you have to get government involved. Whatever you do, the government has to be the ultimate authority on it. So, but I'm going to save my value judgments for the moral part.
Right.
So on the fourth one, the incentive for innovation, there's pretty decent evidence and theoretical frameworks that show that yes, it does. Because either way, if you have to pay for something, if that payment exceeds the cost of reducing your pollution, like if you can implement better machinery,
better carbon capture technology, or better whatever,
and both of them leave the government out of the development side. So if you apply a tax, anytime if Sask Power is required to pay a tax, well, Sask Power is not a good example because it's the crown, but let's say if any company is required to pay a certain amount of tax, any reduction in their CO2 emission is direct saving on tax, so as long as the cost of the tax is higher than the cost of mitigating your CO2 emission, it's going to incentivize innovation. And the same with the cap and trade. The idea is that companies will trade back and forth and the price will go up and up and up until it reaches that point where it's high enough that companies will start when the permits become too expensive. And it's also part of the auctioning off to get a sense of how much it costs different industries to reduce their CO2 emission.
Do you think?
Okay, so yeah, go ahead.
Do you think the Green Party would do some crowdsourcing crowdfunding campaign, and raise a bunch of money, buy all the permits, right? To drive the price up.
Well,
that's fucking brilliant, actually.
And reduce the amount of. No, we have all the CO2 carbon.
That's right.
The one thing that
and they're not for sale.
The one thing that
$1 million
a cap and trade has to include is the fine for not complying has to be very high.
Right. Yeah, it would have to be very steep.
Because there have been some examples in the past. I think it was in European countries, if I'm not mistaken. I should have written this down. But where the penalty was too low and people just pay the penalty. Oh, sure, it's cheaper than cheaper than to deal with all this bullshit. So yeah, the
penalty should be death.
Yeah,
death to the CEO.
And so that's another
that
thing.
would fucking wake him up, wouldn't it?
I don't think the death penalty actually
it reminds me of George Carlin again.
Yeah, I was having the exact same flashback.
All right. So
sorry.
On the fifth criteria and the morality side of it. So this is very subjective, but yet you can get a different perspective on some of these things if you look at it from the morality criteria. So the one thing that goes into it is people's feelings about things. So tax is just hated by pretty much everybody. And so it's very unpopular, and that's another consideration that why if people hate something very, very much, even if it is a very good option, sometimes it's so unpopular that you can't really do it. So yeah, try implementing a carbon tax in Texas.
Right.
Yeah. So that's one of the considerations you have to take into account. Cap and trade, on the other hand, is much more acceptable, largely because people don't fully understand it. It's way more complicated than taxes. Taxes are very straightforward, simple to understand. Cap and trade, it sounds fancy. It's like market control. But if people actually understood it, it's kind of similar in the end. You're going to pay money for your carbon that you emit. That's pretty much the concept. And so that brings us to the next point, and I would say one of the more important ones. Tax, all revenue goes to the government to invest in society. So you can either go back to the rebates. So part of it should automatically go to rebates, but not all of it, because essentially what you're trying to do is only give back the poor people or the low income people's portion of it.
Right.
So you would, even if you gave them back 100% of the carbon tax that applied to them, you would still have all the rest. And in a carbon tax scheme, the recommendation is that governments should either just give it back to society in the form of welfare system or invest it into infrastructure and technology development for cleaner energy. So, but I mean, you could endlessly, government can invest, but that's one of the I guess, moral goods of tax, that the government actually gets money from it, and it's not the corporations profiting from it, where cap and trade, any profit that is generated from the sale or the trade back and forth, it's in the hands of corporations and just makes their bottom line better, which makes it less moral than if, because they're not going to invest it into, they might invest it into development, but they won't invest it into like rebates or welfare stuff. So they're going to invest it for profit.
Yeah, it seems to almost fit into the fair versus unfair category to some extent.
Yeah, and that's the fairness. It's more about empirical fairness,
right?
Where morality is more about kind of your view of humanity, like which
right.
Like the fairness the fairness criteria is more about, is the right person paying for it? So like we're not. Which is also like there's carbon subsidies. That's a different one. But so you actually give subsidies to companies who reduce their pollution. So for every ton they reduce, you give them, instead of charging them, you use, and that's considered both immoral and unfair because the
money's coming from the wrong end.
Well, you're paying the polluter,
right?
So, and that's kind of what the fairness clause is about. Or the criteria that the person responsible for it should pay for it, kind of thing. But yeah, so that's my spiel.
Very well done.
Any questions?
I learned something.
Well, I can't remember what my question was at the start, but we have a couple questions from the chat room.
Oh dear.
Let's see. What has he got here?
Quite busy in there.
Holy shit.
How does cap and trade work for regular consumers?
So the way, in theory, and so since cap and trade is not that widely used, there's a couple of examples. There was one that Montreal had, or Quebec and California, they had like a weird international one. That one was like even weirder because it was across borders. But the way it's supposed to work is the typical market thing. Like if it gets passed on to the consumers. So like, let's say if the minimum wage raises, like the capitalist theory of the market is that in the end, the consumer will pay that wage increase. So cap and trade would assume the same thing, that if your company has to purchase permits to pollute,
then they'll pass that charge on to their consumers.
It'll somehow get passed on to the consumers.
Okay. Do I have to buy carbon/pollution credits every year?
That is, so the cap and trade is also the consumer doesn't really need to worry about it too much.
Right.
It also gets passed down. Normally, with the examples that we have now, it is just with big firms. So like if you run a little coffee shop, you will not have to buy carbon credits. So companies of the scale of Potash Corp, Sask Power, Sask
they
Energy,
have to worry about it.
So what we consider big companies. So that's like it's not clearly defined, but yeah, think of it as individuals don't worry about it. Big companies do.
Okay.
Oh, another thing I should say before you ask the next question. Question: cap and trade is only functional if you have a large number of big corporations. Because if you only have 3 and they start and they like in Saskatchewan, it wouldn't work very well if it was just Saskatchewan, because we only have. Well, I've just mentioned all the 3 that we have.
Right.
That would probably apply.
That's it.
And you might be able to include some of the slightly smaller ones.
What about Roman Empire Studios? I think they
should be first on the list.
Pretty big carbon footprint over here.
But yeah, so there's also not a number of what a large number means, but you should have dozens at least participating. Otherwise, the market will not function very well.
Okay, so Aaron said the province, he lives in BC, the province is taxing what people want to reduce, aka carbon pollution, and using the revenue to reduce taxes on things British Columbians want to encourage, which is employment, investments, and economic growth. Every dollar generated by the carbon tax is returned to British Columbians through reductions in other taxes.
Yeah. So they have that part of it, and then they have the rebates are essentially tax credits, but you can specifically choose who you give them back to, like he said. If you want to help low income, or if you want to promote the arts, if you want to put it to education. I mean, once the government has it, they can then decide how to do it, and that's where also kind of the moral criteria comes in. How should they spend it? They should not give the big corporation tax breaks with that money, because that would kind of defeat the purpose. But yeah, so there's whatever they want to spend it on.
I think that's about it for the actual questions in the chat room. Anybody else?
That was the most chatter I've ever heard.
Well, there's actually quite a few comments back and forth between Aaron and Lachlan, but it's not stuff that we necessarily have to address.
So is it, I just have one question. Is the mob outside or no?
Yeah, there's pitchforks.
I'm sure there
pitchforks?
are.
Okay.
But we're down in the basement.
Can you hear the banjos?
Don't tell them where we are. But yeah, so that any other comments or questions before we end? Yeah.
No, that was very informative. I learned a lot.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Excellent segment. All right, listener feedback. There was none. That's an easy one. We are going to do an AMA type episode. So shoot your questions to mail@brainstormblog.net or message the page on Facebook or comment in the Facebook group. The Facebook group is actually quite active lately, thanks to Lachlan and a couple other members who like to post stuff and comment. So that's good. Patreon. No new patrons. But thank you to our $5 and up patrons, Lachlan, Daryl, Aaron, Lisa, Rob, and Positively Skeptical. We got no new iTunes reviews, but we did get a 5-star on Facebook. Yay. From Chris Reed. Says, hardest working podcast in all of Canada. Always a damn fine product. The panel is fun. Cory is a hell of an interviewer, and they always have entertaining guests. Worth every penny on Patreon.
Wow.
So that's good.
That was nice.
Every penny.
Every penny. That's
Wrong.
right. Wrong.
So that last penny was useless.
Plug your stuff. Anybody got stuff to plug?
No.
I got nada.
I got stuff.
Go ahead,
You
Dave.
always have stuff.
I got stuff. No, if you're in Regina next week, starting January 26th at the Rainbow, you can go see the movie Talent. If you would like to hear my music, my comedy scoring, it's comedy scoring, and see some local actors in a film.
It looked entertaining.
It's kind of corny in a good way. Like I enjoy it. But yeah, again, January 26th at the Rainbow in Regina. I'll be there for a week, and if it does well enough, it'll be there longer. So
nice.
There you go.
I am working on our other shows as fast as I can. My work week was crazy, so nothing has gotten done. Yeah.
Hardest working my ass.
Yeah, that's right. As usual, we have the GoFundMe for our attempt to get a second conference going. You can help out by going to gofundme.com/shift2reasonconference 2018 with dashes in between all the words.
Can we seriously get a GoFundMe started for buying all the carbon credits?
That would be great. All the cap and trade.
I'm not sure if you understand how much that would be. That would be.
We could raise a few million, tens of million.
Well, so just okay. I don't want to derail it, but if you have dozens and dozens of big firms, and if you imagine how much they pollute, like let's say if you have hypothetically 50 at minimum, and all the carbon that they produce,
right
at roughly like $30 a ton or some crap like that. That's roughly the estimate where it should be.
So we could get like 10 tons.
Yeah.
Let's do it. Let's just buy a ton of carbon. Let's just fucking do it.
Let's just buy
a ton.
A ton. 1 ton of carbon.
And that's actually one of the things that it's starting to catch on. Oh, shit, I could stop. But you can, there's people that are promoting and companies that are offering, you can actually voluntarily buy carbon credits. When you take a flight, you can volunteer to pay $10 extra to offset the carbon that your flight or you being
right?
I should have written this shit down, but there's a couple of airlines that started doing that. I can't remember which ones. I don't know if they still do it, but it was a thing.
It's interesting.
Yeah. And there was a couple of other industries that were also like toying with it.
If we owned a ton of carbon, we could be like, no, we don't want to pay the extra $10, but you can have part of our ton of carbon.
Here, rip off a piece of this permit. Here you go.
You can have 1/100th of our ton of carbon.
I love it.
All right. Let's do our book excerpt, poem, or quote, or whatever.
Okay. So this is from the book Fantasyland, How America Went Haywire, a 500-Year History by Kurt Anderson. It's a nonfiction book. That's what I'm reading lately. It's basically searching to understand like the American current propensity for believing whatever the fuck you want, fake news, the Trump phenomenon, and everything. I think he started writing it before Trump, but it's all related to that. So, and he does it by looking into the history of America, how it was formed. And so it's very interesting. I'm not done reading it yet, but this is from the introduction. So here we go.
Okay.
We have passed through the looking glass and down the rabbit hole. America has mutated into Fantasyland. How widespread is this promiscuous devotion to the untrue? How many Americans now inhabit alternate realities? Any given survey of people's belief is only a sketch of what people in general really think, but from reams of research, drilling down and cross-checking and distilling data from the last 20 years, a rough, useful census of American belief, credulity, and delusion does emerge. By my reckoning, the more or less solidly reality-based are a minority, maybe a third of us, but almost certainly fewer than a half. Only a third of us, for instance, believe with some certainty that CO2 emissions from cars and factories are the main cause of Earth's warming. Only a third are sure the tale of creation in Genesis isn't a literal, factual account. Only a third strongly disbelieve in telepathy and ghosts. 2/3 of Americans believe that, quote, angels and demons are active in the world, end quote. At least half are absolutely certain that heaven exists, ruled over by a personal God, not some vague force or universal spirit, but a guy. More than a third of us believe not only that global warming is no big deal, but that it's a hoax perpetrated by a conspiracy of scientists, government, and journalists. A third believe that our earliest ancestors were humans, just like humans today, that the government has, in league with the pharmaceutical industry, hidden evidence of, quote, natural cancer cures, that extraterrestrials have recently visited or now reside on Earth. A quarter believe vaccines cause autism and that Donald Trump won the popular vote in 2016 general election. A quarter believe that our previous president was or is the Antichrist. A quarter believe in witches. Remarkably, no more than 1 in 5 Americans believe the Bible consists mainly of legends and fables, around the same number who believe that, quote, the media or the government adds secret mind-controlling technology to television broadcast signals, end quote, and that U.S. officials were complicit in the 9/11 attacks. When I say that a third believe X or a quarter believe Y, it's important to understand that those are different thirds and quarters of the U.S. population. Various fantasy constituencies overlap and feed each other. For instance, belief in extraterrestrial visitation and abduction can lead to belief in vast government cover-ups, which can lead to beliefs in still more wide-ranging plots and cabals, which can jibe with a belief in an impending Armageddon involving Jesus. Fantasyland operates like the European Union, a collection of disparate domains of various sizes overlain with a Schengen area that allows citizens of any of the dozens of lands to travel freely among the others, the way Hungarians and Maltese can visit France or Iceland at will. And like intra-European antipathies, there's words here. The mutual contempt among Fantasyland regions can be as intense as their contempt for the reality-based. To many evangelicals, Pentecostals are heretics, and to evangelicals and Pentecostals, Mormons are heretics. Pat Robertson has called Scientology satanic. The Vatican considers Oprah's apostles misguided fools. Different kinds of truthers regard each other as deluded. A lot of the people certain that GMOs are unsafe to eat, despite overwhelming scientific consensus to the contrary, deride deniers of climate change. Indeed, the history of Fantasyland could be rendered bracketologically, I don't know that word, I'm sorry, like college basketball, centuries of continuous playoffs with particular teams losing, Puritans, and winning, Mormons, along the way and continuing to fight it out. Why are we like this? That's what this book will explore.
And what's that book called?
It's called Fantasyland by Kurt Anderson. So, what he does is he goes, like I'm on the beginning here, but he's talking about the foundation of America, how it started, and the people who, they say, they said there was gold and riches and jewels in America, and these are the people who came to America. And so he goes this current culture, he goes back 500 years to try to explain it. It's very interesting.
Sounds like a fascinating guy to have on.
Yeah, sounds like an interesting
I don't know
book.
if we could get that guy to come.
He's a New York Times bestseller. We can get him on. Cool. I'll finish reading the book before maybe.
Sounds good.
Yeah. But I thought that really summed up a lot of what we do on this podcast very well. We kind of pick all those things all the time and make fun of it. But that, we're poking fun at that 2/3 of what he said, what he calls 2/3 of Americans.
2/3 of humanity.
Well, he's actually focusing on Americans. He does actually acknowledge in this, as an American he acknowledges in the introduction that it actually happens in other countries too. So I was very impressed that an American knew there were other countries. So he's part of the third. So
he's part of that 1/3. That's right.
Yeah. So
all right.
That's it.
Yeah. No, that sounds really good. Some of that sounded very familiar. Like I don't know. I haven't read that book myself. So I wonder if maybe I'm reading something that's similar. All right. Let's cue that outro music. You can check out the show notes at thebrainstormpodcast.com and our website, brainstormblog.net. Thanks to our financial supporters, the Utah Outcasts, Bassett, Will, Aaron, Daryl, Destin Sucks, Lachlan, Lisa, Magnus, Michael, Nathan, Positively Skeptical, Rob, and Stephanie. If you want to join them and help the show grow, then you can do that at patreon.com/brainstormpodcast. You can join us every second week when we broadcast live on brainstormradio.net. Our next show is on February 2nd, and our guests will be Matt and Phil from the Semi-Intellectual Musings podcast. Thanks to Marianne Garneau for joining us. Thanks to Dave for our intro music. Thanks to Alex Capper-Murdoch for doing the voiceover for the intro and some of our ads. And thanks to Jason Camo for our outro music. You can find his stuff at aloststateofmind.com. All music played is either with permission or under the SOCAN license to play. For more information on SOCAN, you can check out the music license info page on our website, brainstormblog.net. Remember to give us a rating, a thumbs up, or a fave on your podcatcher of choice. Join our Facebook group, like our page, follow us on Twitter, share the show, and spread the word. For live listeners, stick around for the after show. Maybe somebody will be here. We'll see. You can go to brainstormafterhours.com and listen to the bonus content before it goes patron only. Thanks for listening, and remember, the truth matters.
This is an opinion-based podcast. Each person on the podcast is responsible for their own opinions, and those opinions don't necessarily reflect the views of the rest of the panel. Any guests or anyone associated with the people on the podcast, such as spouses, partners, children, other family members, friends, or employers. No one person speaks for the podcast with the possible exception of Cory, and he doesn't speak for anyone else on the show. The Brainstorm podcast does not represent the views of our sponsors.
We just wanted to say thanks to everyone who listens to us, shares the show, gives us a rating on iTunes or Stitcher, or supports us through Patreon and Gumroad. We don't have a lot of interactions with our listeners, but what we have had proves that we attract some of the best people around. Smart, kind, and cool. An audience truly worthy of the titles hardcore and woo-free. Thanks for helping us make the world a smarter place.